It's about the majesty of Black womanhood and independence and freedom of knowing who you are, what you are, why you are, and your worth.
Welcome to Script Apart, a podcast about the first draft secrets of great movies. Each episode, we speak to a brilliant screenwriter who's kindly dug out their initial screenplay for what became a beloved movie, discussing what changed, what didn't, and why. From first draft to the big screen. Today we're launching a very special awards season miniseries. Yes, it's that time of year again. The Oscars and Baftas are around the corner, and to celebrate over the next few weeks, we're going to be chatting to writers responsible for some of the most astounding movies of the last 12 months, all of which would make worthy winners at this year's ceremonies, if you ask us. First up, we're delighted to be joined by the excellent Ruben Santiago-Hudson, writer of the acclaimed Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Adapted from a play by the legendary August Wilson, Ruben's screenplay transported audiences to a swelteringly hot 1920s Chicago, inside a bustling recording studio where across one afternoon, blues pioneer Ma Rainey is scheduled to record new material. Things, however, don't go quite to plan, and as the temperature rises, so do tensions between Ma, played by the astonishing Viola Davis, and Levee, an ambitious but emotionally wounded young trumpet player played by the late, great Chadwick Boseman. I caught up with Ruben to hear how he translated these beautifully complex characters from stage to screen, delving into his close friendship with August Wilson, some curious differences between his early drafts and the final film, and the importance of acknowledging on screen that the real-life Ma was a woman whose sexuality was fluid and whose spirit of generosity ran strong. This is a spoiler-filled conversation if you hadn't already guessed, so if you're yet to see this remarkable movie, I really do encourage you to hit pause now, go check out Ma Rainey's Black Bottom on Netflix, then come back as we dive into every detail of this incredible film. If you enjoy what we do, please do rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, as that really helps the word get out there about this show. And if you'd like to be the first to find out what the next film in our award season miniseries is going to be, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We're at Script Apart on both. Till next time, a 1, a 2, you know what to do. This is Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Camille Demek. Hey Ruben, so great to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure's all mine. There has been such a wonderful reaction to this wonderful film. I guess let's start at the beginning. I know it was 1984 when you first experienced August's incredible stage version of this story. Can you tell me about your experience of the play and your first interpretations of what this story was about?
I actually was coming off a tour heading into New York to go off Broadway. So I was in a wonderful play called Ceremonies of the Dark Old Men at the Negro Ensemble Company. And I was in town and everybody was talking about this August Wilson play and this August Wilson writer. I already knew Lloyd Richards, the director, because he was a person that I had looked up to and admired and been following his career and trying to find a way to work with him. So I found my way into the theater at intermission, actually, because I couldn't afford a full price ticket. So I found the way to, just slide in and get up as high as you could in the double balcony way up top. I sat on the stairs and the lights came on and these gentlemen started talking. And I started listening and I was like, I got so comfortable. It was like, well, I know these people. These are the people that I was raised with. This is my Uncle Bill and this is, Elijah Winfield. And this is, I just knew him. And I just leaned in and I was totally enraptured by how casual, how wonderful the rapture of their language was, because I knew it. I felt comfortable. And then suddenly I felt it, something on my face, and I thought it was a fly, but it actually was tears. I started crying because I never knew that there was a place on Broadway for these salt-of-the-earth blue-collar men who had basically taught me most everything I knew other than what Mama taught me about life. And there they were. So I knew I had to be a part of it, and I started chasing them. I left a little note right then for August and Lloyd, and I continued to leave a note every time I saw one of their plays until I finally got an audition.
And on top of the familiarity, of these characters and their experiences and their language. Did you initially have an interpretation of what this play was about and what this story was trying to say about the Black American experience?
No, I didn't. I didn't judge it. I didn't come up with any themes or any interpretations. I was just totally just snatched in by the warmth and the recollections of a life that I always thought was extremely valuable, that it didn't seem like anywhere else that anybody thought it was valuable. Just the existence of African-American people in this country and the journey that we've taken and the way we navigate our space, in the way we enjoy each other's company, our banter. And no one ever seemed to think that was important. And then it was so important in this moment, because here it was on Broadway with 1,100 people riveted. So it's like, wow, it's important to them. So there is a place for the life that I know, the people that I know, my culture, on the biggest stages in the world. So no, I didn't come up with any themes or ideas. I just was happy to be a part.
There's a great Viola Davis quote, I think, that speaks to that point. She said that what's truly novel and truly progressive are stories in which Black people are just allowed to be Black Americans, living their lives, having their conversations, going about their routines, rather than these stories being about the experiences they undergo that bring them pain. And although elements, of course, of like the inescapable racism and oppression faced by people of color at that time in America do eventually become present in the movie, there really is so much time and space within the film given just to seeing these guys interact. Why was that such an important thing from August's play for you to protect as you brought it to screen?
Because August always said that everything contained in human life is contained in Black life. And that's simply just saying that we're human. And so for me, a lot of the lessons that August taught me about don't be afraid to let your characters talk and always think of yourself as the center of the world, things like that. So you have to remember as an actor, where I first, I'm still an actor, but is where I first got some sort of prominence. 80% of the time I was working with white directors and white writers who, whether I was doing Shakespeare or Pinter or Ibsen or Shaw, who didn't really know or recognize the importance of Black life. They just said, fit in, Ruben, go fit in. August didn't make me fit in. I was the world. I was in the center of the world. The people that I know and cherish were the center of the world. So I had to make sure that I did not lose the essence of that in the film, that I celebrated that as well. So I was not afraid to let an actor have a monologue, a character to have a monologue. I couldn't do all of them, but I did let them all have an aria. They all sang an aria, and some longer than others, but they all got to sing their song. And I wanted to make sure that I honored that, opposed to the old Hollywood cliche, open it up, make something happen. What's happening is relationships are developing. What's happening is relationships are being navigated, situations, conflicts, joy, sexuality, sex, intellect, know-how. It's just like all this is being navigated. So if I'm going to have the power of August's play or his writing interpreted through film, I can't leave the muscularity of what he does best. He's a wordsmith. So all of a sudden I start cutting all the words and just make it all cinema. I know it's a motion picture. I'm telling story through pictures as well. So if I removed language, I would write in the script the kind of images I wanted to see that would actually fill in that space that the language had been taken out. But since I knew the language so well and the melodies of August's cadences, that I could pick up the melody even by taking out a whole phrase of the song. I could still connect the melody, and you would still have the rhythm in the authenticity of Black language and Black style.
I hope August never sort of asked you to pay him back for that ticket that you snuck in. You went from, you became.
I paid him back many times.
Yes, you can say that again.
I would take him to breakfast every chance I could.
You guys were close friends. I've read a profile of August once that said that he had this punching bag suspended from his ceiling behind his desk, and that whenever he hit a roadblock in his writing, he'd throw a few punches till he had that kink in his story all figured out. How does your writing process compare, Ruben? I can't see a punching bag behind you, but presumably you have rituals, you have a certain time of day that perhaps you like to work, and certain accompaniments to writing that help you get a great work like Ma Rainey onto the page. How do you write?
I'm most alive in the morning early before the sun comes up. That's when I write. Some writers write very late. I write very early. And by about 6 o'clock, from 6 to 6, that's my day, and if what I try to do is make sure that I keep my mind and my focus in on the task. So with a writer, it doesn't always flow, the writing. The ideas don't always flow. So how do you tease those ideas? I start looking at documentaries. I start listening to music. But long as it's about the period in the subject that I'm dealing with, like for instance, I'd be writing Ma Rainey or something, and though I had the Bible right there with August wrote it. I just have to turn it into a film, and keep him there. Like sometime I would get stuck. How I'm going to make this transition, and then I'll start reading about just blues women of the 20s. I start reading about Sippy Wallace and Victoria Spivey and Bessie Smith and Alberta Hunter. I start reading about their history as well, because the celebration of Ma is the celebration of all these dynamite Black women entertainers of that time. And even more so into the Black women who have been the backbone of our communities. So I expand it, but still the focus, though it's a wider net I'm casting, it's about the majesty of Black womanhood and independence and freedom of knowing who you are, what you are, why you are, and your worth. So I would just say, so how do I fortify that and continue to fortify that? So when I hire myself, because somebody hires me through my company, so I have to treat my company the same way I treat your company. I treat, you want a day's work, I'm gonna give you a day's work. So I just keep focused for that amount of time. I make a minimum 8 hours, and I don't go over 12.
And was that something you managed to discipline yourself to do without too much trouble? Because sometimes writers who have a very close personal attachment to a story, it's very easy to fall into a spiral of late nights, obsessive working patterns. I wonder whether that was the case with you, given your incredible closeness with August and what I presume was a deep desire to tell his story in a way that honored him. Well,
there is a personal connection that I have to honor, but also I have to honor a professional connection that I have to the task at hand. So, I have to treat August as much as I revere and love his work. I have to treat him like I would treat any other writer in the respect that nothing is so precious that it's not expendable. So I have to, but what you have to, the balancing act is if it's expendable, you can't take off a limb and think you're going to have the same movement with your arm. What is compensating for that, and how? So I honor the relationship and the connection to August, because it's empowering, but it also is burdensome, because you listen, if I write some other film and people feel, well, we don't love this take, we're going to thank you, Ruben, here's your pay, we're going to get somebody else to write on it too. You say, okay, well, you get a little bit of dent in your armor, but you keep trucking. So because of my respect for him and our relationship, and what he means to the African-American community. So it was more pressure, because get it right, Ruben, get it right. So then I have to back off of that and just say, you know how to do this. And you know what August was about, what was important to him, and get as much of that as you can here, it's kind of complicated, but that's it.
But as you mentioned, you had his play as the Bible and you were bringing it to screen. But the play, I believe, is like 2.5 hours long, and you were trying to condense this story into 90 minutes. Can you tell listeners who perhaps aren't familiar with the book what some of the things were that you had to cut and how difficult some of those decisions were?
Well, I wasn't trying to cut it to 90 minutes. I'd have kept it 3 hours, but they kept, I mean, the first script that I handed them was about 150 pages, and they looked at me and just raised an eyebrow and said, take this back and come back later. And then I came back with like 129. Then I came back with like 112. Then I was really knew that we had it at 106. And then I end up giving them 96 pages. But I'd have kept it at 149 if it was up to me. But my job said, and the people that hired me said they're not accepting that. So I had to make the challenge harder, if it gets to the point where I don't feel that August is there, then I have to just relinquish, just say I'm the wrong writer, because I don't think I can't go any further away from the story than this. And I didn't think they wanted to lose me, and never got to that point where we were considering, unless they got mad at me and said, you want somebody else to do this job? I'm like, no, I don't. But if you need somebody else, we never got to that point, because one thing we all agreed upon is we wanted a great film. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to make sure that it was an August Wilson film. So when I say that, I mean, he is the source. The film is a Ruben Santiago-Hudson film, even though it says a George C. Wolfe film, because the DJA they strong, but it's an August Wilson film that I was assigned and blessed to have the opportunity to deliver, and then you hand it to this great director, and then he throws his vision on it. You know what I mean? And all the time I'm watching way back in the shadow saying, I hope he keeps that. I hope he keeps that. Because after the writer does his or her work, then basically they are on the sideline as a cheerleader. You have no more involvement, unless there's some special things. So we need you to come back and do something. No, after that, I, just hope and pray that August would be proud and that I would be happy with what I had submitted. You know what I mean? I don't think I answered your question, but I answered something,
Was there anything that it was painful to lose as you went through that process of cutting down?
Yes, everything. Mm-hmm. Everything. And I say this honestly, I wanted, as I said in the outset of this long answer, I'd have kept it at 100. I'd have kept it at, hey, listen, there are movies that are 2.5 hours. It's just unfortunately there aren't many Black movies that are 2.5 hours. It's still this old stereotype that what Black people have to say is not important. It is. People might not want to admit it, but since this is a time of truth, that's the truth that I have found out in my career. Your life is not important, and what you have to say and deal with is not important. And so, I mean, they still have things, Black films don't sell in Europe and stuff like that. Old ideas that are long been destroyed. People want to get to know people, cultures. People are interested genuinely, and those that aren't interested, then stay in your corner and stay small-minded. But generally, people are interested. I'm interested. That's why I go to see a Pinter play. That's why I go to see a David Henry Wong play. That's why I'll go to see Lorca, because I am interested. And I think I'm not unusual being interested. I think most people are interested because it's fascinating how we're so different, yet we're so similar. We all want the same things. You know what I'm saying? So, but Hollywood has formulas, and you fight against those ideas. Open it up, make it bigger, opposed to what's very important is the story. We're storytellers. So let me tell a good story. Fortunately for me, a good story was already told. I just have to translate it into a different medium. Mm. But the great story is there. Now, how do I impact that story with my ideas, which all of my ideas spur from what he has in the play? Everything that you see that's extended or introduced is from an idea that's already in the play. I didn't come and just go in the room, I'm going to come up with something great. No. Oh, that through line is there. We just never got a chance to follow through in the play. Like introducing Ma Rainey in the tent. That's her power. Because through this whole recording session, she's navigating her power. I want a Coca-Cola. No, give him a microphone. I ain't doing nothing, and I ain't signing nothing. I ain't doing nothing, power. So until she signs that contract, she's the most powerful person in the world of this movie. And that's why it's so hard to sign that contract. That's why it takes so long. It ain't about getting that little bit of money. It's about, I got to give up all my power. And so I put her in the most powerful place. So you could see what she was holding on to. In that tent, people were like sweating and crying. And in the film script, I say, sweat pouring down the people's ebony faces. Is it sweat or tears? Who cares? I said, these people are colored. This is a Saturday night and ain't no better place or thing to be. That's just the way I write it,
But before we get to that moment, there's an interesting scene in the film that's actually not in the screenplay. So it's nighttime, crickets are chirping, birds are hooting. We see this dense black forest and two breathless black figures running through it. There are dogs barking, which gives the impression of a chase. This is an image, of course, that we've seen 1,000 times before in movies whose portrayal of the Black American experience centers on their trauma. Instead, these two people arrive at a scene of joy and community, that tent scene. They were running to something rather than away. I was interested to ask about this because, as I mentioned, it's not in the screenplay. How did this scene find its way into the movie? And can you describe the playfulness of that moment? Because it seems like there's a comment being made about the type of story this is not.
Well, that's all George.
Really?
If you read the script, my shot is a God shot, way up above that show tent with roads leading to the show tent. Like I describe it as like spokes on a wagon wheel. That's my shot. And George is the director. So George's shot is, let me fool you. Let me make you think we're running the runaway slaves or something, but we're running to something. So he's going to contradict what your thought pattern, what you've been trained to think. So I thought that was wonderful in what he did. And I also think if you'd have shot my God shot, that would have been wonderful too. And if I was directing, I'd have shot the God shot. I don't think you lose anything either way. And in all honesty, I don't think you gain anything. I think it's both ways to open it up, I thought would be wonderful.
Your description of a God shot, that's kind of appropriate because you treat that opening sequence in your script as pretty much a religious experience. You describe these people as being sanctified by Mars blues. This scene,
you be reading, man. You be on it.
Oh, yeah, I do my homework, Ruben. This film about this incredible woman who's joyful in her gift and defiant in the ways that others try to exploit that gift. It might not work without this opening sequence where you communicate exactly how special her talent is. How did you approach, this opening scene? Was it tricky communicating the brilliance of Ma? How did you get it on the page?
Well, really, a lot of it was in consultation with George. George and I kept talking about we're negotiating power, so we have to establish power. And all the research that I have all around the house says that Ma's greatest power was in show tents in the eastern, southeast United States, that in these areas, it was like a revival tent. In these areas, it was like the thing they had to look forward to when the world was beating them down. Ma Rainey was coming to town with her train and car and her dancers and her show and her, so we have something to look forward to other than snatching cotton balls off vines or whatever, or pulling tobacco, working levee camps. Ma's coming. So I wanted to create what that meant to people. So in George, having those guys running replicates what I'm talking about. Ma's coming. Ma's here. So we think it was very important to establish that, because in the play it starts out with the first things you hear are the white men talking. And that's not the first thing we want to hear in this movie. We wanted to feel Ma Rainey. And that's why, because in the play, she comes in on page 48. And so I couldn't wait to page 48. Everybody keeps talking about Ma's coming. So I let you see. So while you're waiting, what you're waiting for, there is going to be a tornado. And we've seen the power of the impact of that tornado.
You intercut these scenes in your draft with glimpses at what was happening at the time for Black Americans and how Ma Rainey's music was intersecting with some of those big social changes. So you describe this montage of archival images from the Great Migration, black folk on train cars packed to the gills and buckboard wagons stacked with families heading north. The field workers watched the trucks and wagons disappear up the road, fueled by Ma Rainey's song. There's not a lot of explicit mention of the Great Migration in the movie, but it feels like an important backdrop to the film. How important would you say that historical context is to this story?
Well, my original script of that, which I should put in there, I'm gonna donate somewhere. I actually shoot that footage instead of archival photos. That footage, we're talking about movies now. We have to talk about money. When I first write it, I don't write concerned about money. I may ask you, what's the budget? And they always say, just write your movie. And then I write this huge movie. And they say, no, that's going to cost too much money, because I had trains going. You got to find a 1920s train. I had the buckboard wagon just driving up the road. I had people picking cotton. Okay, you got to get cotton season, unless it's archival film. You got to get cotton season. You got to rent that field. And you got to get the people out there who can pick it. So those things add up after when you hand them that script and they said, no, we can't shoot that. So you got to do something different. So you go the easy route. I always write the film the most difficult. I say, I'm not going to worry about how to make it happen. You make it happen. I'm the writer. I'm going to show you what a great story is. I'm going to hand you a great story. You film it. And then they start telling you, we can't film this. We can't have a swamp. You said, we need a levee camp. That means we got to find a levee camp where, people build levees. We don't have that. They do have them somewhere, but you got to go to that location. It might be in Louisiana, might be in Mississippi. Then you got to get that cotton, got to be in Tennessee or Memphis. Then you got to get, so they said, Rube, archival photographs, archival photographs. But I described the things that I would have filmed, given the kind of budgets they give to Marvel movies.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because the film does retain such an intimacy of a play. And I don't know, there's a lot of plays that get adapted. They often lean into the sort of possibilities of the medium. There are different sets and the different editing rhythms and cuts within a scene. It's a whole different storytelling language. But Ma Rainey, I thought, it retained a lot of the sort of feel of a play, even though it was cinematic. And I thought that was a, sort of a purposeful thing, but it sounds like it might have been born out of practicality as well.
Somewhat, but no, you can't lose the essence of this is a play. A play that was written about a specific group of people in a specific place. I don't mean general place, a recording studio for a specific amount of time. So I think you lose some of the power if you start opening it up too much for the sake of, it's a film, let's do something different. You hurt the muscularity and the brilliance of August's writing. Some of the combustion of the play is because of the confines. And so in turning it from a play that's written that takes place in the fall to a play that takes place in the summer, you add more combustion, more heat, more pressure. So we wanted to make that, how do we raise the stakes of the pressure? And if you start taking it out and going places, you start diluting it. We had enough of going outside. There's a car accident. You know what I'm saying? There's I used that alley, them coming down the alley, because I wanted you to see slow drag toting that bass coming down the L train, so but once we come down, we go in. And George thought it would be interesting to add that when she sent him to the store, that they would walk in the store, because he, and all the white guys just stop and look. So I said, okay, so boom. But he felt that would add to storytelling, and anything that builds storytelling, that gives you more power, it's good for the story. But we definitely didn't want to spend time making it a movie about them going to the store. What happened then? All we know is he came back with the Coca-Cola,
Your screenplay then drops us into Bronzeville, Chicago, 1927, where a scorching hot summer sun looms over, as you put it here. The heat is a really interesting aspect of this movie. It contributes to this tinderbox feeling that's going to build and build throughout the film. We don't get to meet Ma yet. That's to come. We do get to meet some of her band, though, including Levee. So Levee was played, of course, by Chadwick Boseman, who died tragically before the film's release. So much has been said about what he brought to this performance and how this performance, just for so many people, underlined the size of his loss. Your introduction to this character is really interesting. We see him enthralled by these fancy shoes in a shop window. He buys them. There's obviously kind of a narrative purpose to these shoes. They're going to be what sparks the confrontation at the end of the movie. Was there something thematically that they meant to you as well?
Well, in Black culture, particularly people from the South, your hat and your shoes, it was very important. You couldn't have dirty shoes on, and you always needed to have a nice hat. I mean, even men that had no jobs had nice hats, had a hat. Even if the one wasn't so nice to you, it was something precious and a status symbol. So they, even my mother told me, she's from the South, she always says, don't go nowhere, dirty shoes, and take your hat off when you come into the house. So that meant that I would have a hat, So that status, as you noticed, all the Black men had hats. And then we're talking about the 20s. That was part of, that was Black men called that their crown. And those shoes, because they were Florsheim's, meant another level of status. It's like having, Tony Awards and Obie Awards, and it's status. So that was his status symbol. I beat you playing craps last night, and I used your money on some shoes. So it's teasing. And that's what these guys use their time doing, bantering, one-upsmanship, or naysaying the other man.
And yeah, as you say, when Levee reaches the studio, there is a lot of banter and one-upmanship. A lot of the conversation centers around him wanting to play his arrangement of a song, but his bandmates know that Ma won't go for it. And of course, inevitably, they're right. This is really interesting. What was the deeper meaning of this standoff around this arrangement? So Levee should kind of represent a threat to Ma. She's in the twilight of her career. The blues as an art form is kind of moving on. And Levee, in all his spirit and pledges to one day have his own band, he kind of represents a future in music that she's not a part of. Is that kind of what forms part of her resistance to him?
Well, her resistance is to anything that would usurp her power. Her resistance, what Ma has found at this time in her life, is she knows exactly who she is and why. And she also knows that she is free. She's a decision maker. And so when you buck that power, when you usurp that power or try to wrangle that power from her, then you got yourself a fight. And she lets him know, that in no uncertain terms. So Levee is absolutely right about music moving forward and that he knows how to move it forward. Ma is absolutely right, but this is my stuff. So the conflict is built on two people that think they're right. That's what conflict is. I'm right and you're right, but we're not right about the same thing. You might say, that it's real hot today. And I'm saying it's kind of warm. Mm. So, and for me, it's warm, but for you, it's hot. You say, no, it's hot. No, it's warm, man. It's not that hot. Yesterday it was hot. It was like 10 degrees hot, but it's hot to me. So we got conflict. So because both of them are very strong-minded and both of them, none of them will back up. He asked her to fire him. Well, go and fire me. So she said, all right, you fired. And he said, I don't care. Because he's also trying to say, he does care. It hurts. But he's also trying to save face with Dusty May, saying that I'm powerful. He tells me, he says, I'm going to have my own band. I'm powerful. I write music and everything. And now Ma threatens his status and he gets wounded.
You mentioned Dusty May there, and I'm really glad that you brought her up because she is such an interesting character and she plays a small, but I think quite important role in helping us understand who this character of Ma is and the multiple sides to her personality. So Dusty, to the best of my knowledge, wasn't based on any one romantic partner from real life, but Ma really was an openly queer woman. Now, clearly that's something that August in his play, he didn't want to just gloss over. He wanted to acknowledge that on stage. And that's something that you've carried through into your film version. Can you tell me what you found so compelling about their relationship? I don't know, to me, like, there's genuine affection there, but there's also something a little bit tragic and maybe even transactional for Dussie.
Well, first of all, you have to be very, very careful when you describe Ma's sexuality, because don't forget, Ma had 2 husbands and an adopted son, and she had several women. And so I think Ma was free, and it was a time of freedom. Of course, she was attracted to women, but she was attracted to men too. And so I think Ma did what she wanted to do when she wanted to do it. And if she says, that's going to be mine, Ma made it hers. Dussie Mae, that's mine. So, and if she looked over and thought she wanted it to be Cutler, you mine. It depends, so that was the 20s. 1927 is when this play takes place. Men were doing the same thing. County Cullen sailed across on his honeymoon from New York to London with his best buddy, Harold Jackman, the handsomest man in Harlem. And his wife was on the cruise. I mean, so Wallace Thurman, Elaine Locke, men were doing their thing, and then women, Ethel Waters, Phyllis Bentley. So it was a time of people finding their power and gleaming it around, say, I am powerful. So, yeah, I was queer, but she was what she wanted to be when she wanted to be it. You know what I mean? And what's tragic about it is because Dussie Mae finds her way, whatever that way is to get on the path to a better life, she's going to find it. Whether she was in love with Ma or not, that's not evident anywhere in the play. But what was evident is Dussie Mae knows to find her way on the right path to a better life. And Ma was that way. And so, I think it's wonderful to show that, you don't have to be any one thing. And if you don't want to be, you could be everything and or anything. So it's great to see that kind of freedom and power and freedom of expression, particularly from a Black person in his 20s and a woman. Yeah. So that made me tremendously proud to be able to not make that any more emphatic, but to make sure it was included, because maybe somebody would not want to include it. I thought it was very important. August included it. George took it up another level. I took it up another level. And I also took it up another level with her, with Levee, because if Levee was actually going to usurp Ma Rainey, then Dussie Mae needed to be in a power position to be able to take that too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so when she gets with Levee in the basement, she don't have to submit to Levee. She snatches Levee. And if you read the script, you'll see she takes Levee. She decides, go on, stop. Then she takes him. And George said to me one time, are they going to really do the thing? And I said, yeah, they're going to do the thing. So I said, if she's going to go, she's going to really win him. She's going to steal him. And she stole Levee.
And the other person who arrives with Ma is Sylvester. That character is an amazing insight into another side of Ma. Her generosity. We've seen a lot of like the brashness and defiance of Ma, but Sylvester and the way that she really sort of fights for his, chance to have this involvement in the record and to get paid for it. It seems like this character's, being used to sort of show a different side of Ma. Is that fair to say?
Yes. And also it shows the side of Ma empowering her community, the people that she cared about, making sure that they were okay, making sure that is her nephew, making sure that he finds his way to a better life, that he can not just say, I got a nice place to live in a good suit, but to say, I am somebody. I matter. I count. So she wanted to give him responsibility, accountability, a position, and something that would be difficult for him to do. And she was convincing him that you can do it. And once you do this, it shows you can conquer any other thing, any impediment in your way. You can conquer it. And so it was important to her that he was successful and that he can accomplish the things he set out to do. So that shows her sensitivity, and not only her sensitivity, but her grace. Because if not, you'll see just as powerful, this woman is chewing these people's heads off. But no, then you see the way she talked to Sylvester. You get the one I said to get him. Come here now, Sylvester. Now you just take your time, okay? Which shows the dichotomy of Ma, that she could be just as hard as nails, and yet she could be just as sweet as a rose.
And speaking of dichotomies, Ruben, we've seen this kind of like arrogant, energetic, maybe arrogance a bit strong, but this kind of Levee has displayed himself. He's displayed one side of his character, but as preparations are kind of proceeding for the recording, we see a whole nother side of Levee. There's that incredible monologue that he has where he explains his backstory. That is such a powerful and emotive moment in the film. Was it emotive and powerful to write?
Yes. Yes, it was very powerful and cathartic in a way, and painful, and because it's the metaphor for many, many Black men in this country. If we look back at the history, the way that Black men have been abused away, their image, their contributions, their beauty, their intellect, their everything has been snatched, distorted, damaged, deranged. And what is the result of that? There's deep scars, there's deep pain that we have to figure out how to navigate just to not explode all the time. I mean, I have 4 brothers, and all of us can tell you endless stories about how much humiliation we've had to face, how many opportunities that have come for us to be totally destroyed, killed, maimed. And so August uses that speech, in my opinion, as metaphor for a lot of the damage that's been done to Black malehood, manhood in this country. And yet, because it teaches you what can happen to you, he tells about what happened to his father. If you decide, I need vengeance, and I need to feel good, I need to get revenge, then you get destroyed. So you got to figure out how to navigate this thing and win another way. So I know I can say yes, sir, to whoever I want to say yes, sir, is what Levee says. Levee, you don't tell me I'm spooked up by the white man. Let me tell you who I am. I just know how to handle him, because if not, it's not going to turn out good for me. I'm going to win. I'm going to win doing it the only way I can win, through my art, through my talent. I'm going to win, though. I'm going to take advantage of what the white man has through my talent. But I can't go in there and say, you going to give me. No, I'm going to go in there and say, just let me play the songs. Mr. Sturtevant, let me play the song. You ain't heard me play them. And then you turn to them and say, don't say nothing to me. You know what I'm saying? So the dual existence that we have had to live in this country with as people of color, that we live a duality. We have to present ourselves as acceptable to a white world every day. And then we get to go home and be exactly who we are. I gotta present myself when I'm in a white room to make everybody that white in that room comfortable. If I show my passion too strong, I'm angry or I'm loud. But I can be as loud as I want in my house. I'm loud now. My wife will be telling me in a minute, why don't you calm down? But that duality is tough. And if you don't know how to deal with it and navigate it, you're on a path for destruction. So that's what Levee is telling them. I know how to handle it.
Given everything you've just explained, what does the fate that awaits Levee at the end of this film mean to you? By that final scene, we'll have seen the band finally record, we'll have seen the simmering tension between Ma and Levee erupt into an argument in which Levee is fired. We'll also have watched Levee think everything's fine, best thing that ever happened to me, because he struck a deal with the white producer at the sessions to record some of his own compositions. There's then this heartbreaking scene set, I believe, very purposefully on a flight of stairs, in which the producer is always like a step or two above Levee. The producer is essentially ripping him off, offering to take those songs off your hands for a measly $5 a piece. And then in that moment of absolute dejection following that, back in the rehearsal room, Levee takes offense at what he perceives to be Toledo stepping on his shoes, the shoes that he took so much pride in at the beginning of the movie. He plunges a knife into Toledo's back, up to the hilt. Toledo lets out a sound of surprise and agony. Cutler and slow drag freeze. Toledo falls backwards with Levee, his hand still on the knife, holding him up. Levee is suddenly faced with the realization of what he has done. He stepped on my shoe. He did, honest. Cutler, he stepped on my shoe. What did he do that for? Toledo, what did you do that for? It's absolutely heartbreaking. What does that ending mean to you? Is there a lesson to extrapolate from what happens to this complicated kid who had the world ahead of him?
Levee in his pain and his total destruction, everything went wrong for Levee that day. And he struck out. And what he struck out in damage was himself. He killed his history. He killed his life. He killed his career. He hurt his community. He killed himself. 2 people died in that moment. 2 people at least. And then there's a line that happens early on in the play, early on in the movie. That trumpet player, is he going to be here? Sturdivant says that to Irvin. Yeah, he said to Levee, he said he's going to be here. So I let you know in the end of the movie, which does not happen in the play, why he asked that question. Because he was going to get that music. Even though he says, nah, we can't use that music, Levee. I tell you what, then give it to me. Best I can do is give you this money here. And if the man really didn't want it, he wouldn't have snatched it out of his hand and stuck that money in his pocket. Once you stick that money in his pocket and you take the money, the deal is set. So if he really didn't want the music, he just said, here, thanks for writing it, take $5, and he would have walked away. Sturdivant, I'm talking about. Sturdivant does not walk away without the music. And then you see why. Because it's business. And that's the way business has been done when it pertains to people of color in this country since we were thrown on the soil, man. You know, and it's tough. It's sad sometimes, but it's also a victory to see what we have accomplished, despite that's the way business has been done.
Well, Ruben, I could sit here and talk to you all day about this incredible film. Thanks so much for taking the time out today, man. I love this film so much, and I appreciate you coming on Script Apart.
Thank you for your patience and your time, and I really appreciate the fact that you let me have an audience with you today. So thank you. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Kamel Demek, with music from Stefan Bindley-Taylor. Get in touch. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or you can email us, thescriptapartpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.